Good afternoon, and welcome to the second session today in the Power Hour with Alastair and Peter Paul. How are you guys doing?
Doing very well, thank
you. I'm very well, thanks.
Great, fantastic. Good to see you. Good to see you both. We have a very interesting topic ahead of us today, a very current topic, which is basically navigating the Dutch regulation. And as a little starting point here, I'd just like to do some quick introductions just to give some context on this discussion today. So, Peter Paul, why don't you go first?
Absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me on again. I'm really pleased to be here again, and I hope to see everyone soon in person. My name is Peter Paul de Goey. I'm the Managing Director of the Netherlands Online Gambling Association. We are the trade association of online gambling operators that will be applying for a license in the Netherlands.
Amazing. Thank you, Peter Paul. And Alastair, go ahead.
Hi, so my name is Alastair Graham. I'm the CEO of AgeChecked. We're a provider that does age verification and authentication, identity verification, etc. I'm also the co-chair of the Age Verification Providers Association.
Brilliant. It's nice to have you both here. So as a starting point, I mean, there's been a lot of movements now, obviously, in the Netherlands. It's a hot market, and just the other week, it opened now for license applications here in the Netherlands, albeit with a bit of a problems in the day one, but that is the way it is sometimes. So, to open the discussion today, Peter Paul, it'd be really interesting as the head of the trade association in the Netherlands, if you could give us just a little bit of an update on the Netherlands as a market. What is the current status, and now that applications are open, what will this mean for the operators?
Absolutely. So the Netherlands, from the get-go, that is 2012, when the first talks were held about new legislation to allow online gambling, was one of the, let's say, one of the markets that was quite ahead in comparison to other European markets. Last week, Thursday, the new act finally was enacted, and from that moment on, operators that want to get a license in the Netherlands could finally apply for a license. So it's been almost 10 years in the making, we all have good hope that the end result is going to be very good. The Netherlands is currently basically there are incumbents in the lottery arena, the Dutch state lottery. They also have an online betting brand, and they want to enter onto the online gambling market as well. We have Holland Casino, which is the land-based casinos. They want to go online, and they probably have already filed their application. And then there are the slot machine parlors that also want to go online, especially the bigger ones. So this is the landscape currently. The average spend per capita in the Netherlands on gambling, in comparison to other European markets, is lagging behind. So there is some room for growth there. I think further, it's important to mention that the regulation that has come into force is considered to be one of the most strict regulations in Europe, especially on the point of consumer protection. And on the topic for today, the ID and age verification, I think the Netherlands is one of the most far-reaching regulated markets when it comes to this aspect. So what it means for the members of NOGA in the Netherlands, we have a very specific system in which certain operators are told that they have to cool off, which basically means that they will have to stay clean of infringing any of the prioritization criteria. And these are criteria that say that you cannot use a .nl, that you cannot use a Dutch language, or that you cannot use a typical Dutch payment provider. for at least 33 months prior to your application. So there's a lot of calculation being done now by the operators to figure out when they can apply for a license. And some of my members will have to cool off, but other operators have already lodged their application, as far as I understand. But it's an exciting period, and we are very much looking forward to make sure, together with all stakeholders, to make this one of the most successful markets in Europe.
Thank you for that introduction, Peter Paul. And Alastair, as the CEO of AgeChecked, which is an age verification tool, can you talk a little bit about why is age verification so important in this specific market? And kind of what findings have you discovered so far working, being specialized in the Netherlands?
Sure. So I guess it's fair to say our speciality is age verification, although we also provide the full sort of identity suite. The age verification issues is an interesting one in Holland, because part of the specification of why you would get on the cooling down list was whether or not you had age verification previously on a site. So as well as active marketing to adults, one of the stipulations of to get you on the naughty list was were you doing what you should be doing to stop kids from getting onto those sites?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And Peter Paul, can you talk a little bit more on that, perhaps, on the requirements to get on the cooling off list here? And as well, I'd be interested to know, are there any like tier 1 operators that perhaps are on this naughty list currently?
Well, as normally, I don't say anything in specific to any of the members, so I will always speak in general.
Fair enough.
I can only say that I know that some of the members are, like I said, doing the calculations when they can apply for a license, so they are definitely cooling off. And to what Alastair said, which is the age verification at registration requirement that has been set per the 1st of January 2020, that is a really tough one for any operator out there, because at application, the KSA will verify whether you have been applying age verification at registration, so not allowing any consumer to play before you have verified that the age is 18 or above. And if you cannot prove this, that you have been doing this, then you are in a tough position. This might lead to disqualification for a license. And they will be very strict. So this is an important point that Alastair mentioned. And on the other cooling off criteria, I think the requirement not to have a typical Dutch payment provider is the most important one. And there has been some debate going back and forth back in 2017, I think it was, and later on in 2019, when it was further explicated by the regulator KSA, that, for instance, having a payment provider called Ideal, which is typical for the Netherlands, everyone in the Netherlands knows Ideal. If you use Ideal, then that is definitely considered to be an infringement of the prioritization criteria. And some of the operators, and I'm not talking about my members, of course, but in general, some of the operators have been a bit sluggish and did not switch off Ideal in time, or found out that one of the payment providers were using Ideal, but then a few steps down the line. So I can mention a few examples here, but so these cooling off or these prioritization criteria will define whether or not and when you can apply for a license. And the window, let's say the grandfathering period will go from the 1st of April this year to the 1st of April next year. And after the 1st of April next year, the KSA will be not very tough, but will be, it will be cast in concrete. If you're in breach of if you're offering gambling to Dutch consumers without a license, you're considered illegal and you will not get a license.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks for that clarification. We're halfway into the panel here, 10 minutes in, the 10 minutes left. And I just want to remind the audience that we are live at the moment, which is both good and also a bit scary, because you never know what happens with internet connections and so forth. But if you see me looking down to my right here, it's because I'm keeping an eye on the chat here. So if you have any questions, I will keep an eye on that. We just have 10 minutes more, but we'll see if we can answer anything as we go forward. Alastair, a question for you. Being specialized with AgeChecked in the Netherlands market, and now the re-regulation is finally coming into force. Have you seen an uptick in requests in this market? And do you have any findings so far in the customers that you work with? Any insight you can give to potential customers that are looking to strengthen their age verification?
Yeah, so no, there's been a sort of a dramatic increase in terms of interest for our service because of this the window opening in order to get your applications. It's not just the ones that are going to be able to apply with fresh licenses and meet the October start date. There are organisations that have been doing the cooling off and therefore are will be following not too far behind from that October deadline. So yes, definitely more interest. I mean, the insight that I think I could possibly share that's the most useful is when talking to operators is the point that these regulations, as Peter Paul mentioned, are really quite stringent when it comes to onboarding the customers. So everybody, I think, is used to the sort of verification of an individual when they come to on board. What has happened in Holland is, as well as verification, there's also the requirement to do a authentication of an individual's identity. So checking those details that you're being given actually belong to the person you're talking to. There's a requirement to capture identity documentation and check that against the details you've got. That's something that most people associate with sort of enhanced due diligence or payout, but this is onboarding. And then two more checks. There's the check that the bank account information you're given corresponds to that individual. And lastly, there's the exclusion list check, which has to happen at onboarding and every time that individual comes back to your site to gamble. So really, as far as other jurisdictions are concerned, I think that the Dutch are at least as strict as anybody else out there about your ongoing, about your onboarding. So it's useful to contemplate when you're going into this market, how are we going to do this with our customers in a way that's the least friction? This is a lot of asks. And it's a brand new regulatory environment, so nobody's used to any questions at all. So the challenge is the marketing guys, it's the user experience guys. How can you implement these checks in a way that's as smooth as possible?
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. So heavy AML checks in the Netherlands creating a lot of friction for the onboarding of the customers to eventually get to a deposit type of thing. And Peter Paul, you talked about this in our prep call the other day, that there is a reason for why the Netherlands specifically is dealing with this issue on the online gambling front with ID verification requirements. Can you talk a little bit more? What is the background here?
Yeah, so this AML requirement of having, on top of all the verification and the bank account and the check against Crux, which is the self-exclusion register that was already mentioned by Alastair, you need to have, as an operator, you need to have a copy of a valid ID in hand. So you need to be able to pass this information that is connected to one of your players onto the financial intelligence unit. if there are AML, how do you say that? AML reasons for how do you say that? Anti-money laundering reasons to prosecute. This AML translation of the fourth anti-money laundering European directive into Dutch law led to the requirement that also gambling companies will need to have that actual copy of the passport. And this, of course, in an online world is a bit of a Stone Age requirement, because as an operator, you don't want to basically have a big drop off, because consumers don't want to take their passport out of the cupboard or whatever and make a scan and all that stuff. So that the channelization effects of this requirement are probably not going to be very positive, to put it mildly. And this seems to be a contradicting requirement from the AML Act with the Remote Gambling Act, unfortunately. But it's reality, and we have to work with it. So we'll try to make the best of it. And I advise the gambling operators that want to get a license in the Netherlands to, for instance, talk to companies such as Alastair's, and see if there is a one-stop shop solution that they can offer that gives you the copy of the passport, that gives you the verification of the ID, etc.
Yeah, any comments on that, Alastair, on your end?
No, well, I couldn't agree more with that advice. Thank you, Peter Paul. I think, I genuinely, vested interest aside, I actually think that one-stop shop, try and keep it in a single environment and get it done, push the customer through as fast as possible, is really what's required, because it's potentially quite an onerous number of checks that need to happen. So the more efficiency in that process, the better.
Yeah, and I'm also speaking from experience, because I used to work as an operator in the past, and we had a identity verification in place as it was required at the time, and the first provider that we used wasn't very successful. Let's put it that way. So in 50% of the checks, we didn't get a green flag or a red flag. We got no response, which meant that we had to call these customers, or ask these customers to call our call center. And after that, we implemented a Dutch verificator, which wasn't very well known to the Dutch public. And as a result, when people were asked to identify themselves, they were going like, "Oh, this must be some kind of phishing thing," so they clicked away. So the drop off was tremendous, and it's not really nice when you're spending a lot of money on marketing to get new customers to onboard, and that they then drop off because of the ID verification, which is too onerous.
Yeah, naturally, in the acquisition funnel, the removing friction and removing bottlenecks is obviously an absolute key part to get your customer through the funnel and eventually become a deposited customer. As a finisher today, last question from my end is, we talked a little bit now about the current status of the Netherlands regulation, and now as the operators start applying and eventually they become regulated, can both of you guys give a little bit of your expectation on the Netherlands as the market now in the next coming years? Do you see positive on this regulation? Do you feel that there's a risk that the market will become overregulated? We talked here about the friction and the channelization rates that can go down due to this. Peter Paul, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I'm fairly positive on the outlook of the Dutch market. It's going to be tough, and it's going to be stringent oversight and stringent regulations that you will have to abide by. But I do think that there is enough interest for operators to enter the Dutch market and to get a license and to jump through a few burning hoops because it's just required. But there is a huge opportunity for uptake, and if it's done properly, and if it's done with enough consumer protection, if it's done with a focus on fighting match fixing, I'm absolutely convinced that it will be one of the more successful markets in Europe. But as long as, you know, as companies, operators, government, KSA, the regulator, and the incumbents are willing to work together to reach this goal, then I'm absolutely confident that this can be done.
Brilliant. And Alastair, what about on your end?
I think it's going to be a very interesting 12 months from the 1st of October to see how companies go through that cooling off period, go and how engaged the regulator is with the companies that have done the work, have gone through the hoops. That's there will be ripples, but I think I share Peter Paul's enthusiasm. I think the regulator is very engaged in this topic. They're very well versed in all the technical issues. So I see companies that are willing to go through the regulatory hoops being able to have a successful time within a sort of this brand new market, potentially getting rid of a lot of the noise from other smaller operators and being able to capitalize on that.
Yeah. Yeah, and if I can add to that,
yes,
which is a bit naughty probably, but I do really want to impress on the operators that are watching. Just reach out to the trade association, reach out to the local players. You know, become a member of NOGA if that's a possibility for you. But do enjoy the benefits of, you know, your first to market and your information advantage that you will get as a result. So do reach out.
Yeah, brilliant. And as a finisher, on that note, where can you reach Peter Paul, and where can you reach Alastair for more questions?
Now that you ask, it's really a short URL, which is www.no/ga.nl. So no/ga.nl. And you can find all information there, what it costs and the benefits, etc. And you can also get my mobile phone number there and just give me a bell.
Brilliant. You can expect about 300 text messages now, 3 a.m. Peter Paul. Fantastic. What about you, Alastair? How do you reach Alastair?
Okay, so we're available on, so we're AgeChecked.com, AgeChecked.com, and plenty of forms there. We'll pick up and get back to you straight away.
Amazing. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure today. Thanks for giving us an update on this very hot market at the moment. A lot of people talk about Germany, but obviously Netherlands is coming now as well, close to each other. So let's not forget that key market. I wish you a very good day. And for the people who are tuning in, I wish you all a great rest of the Power Hour. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.